A monstrous legacy. The Milwaukee Cannibal, Jeffrey Lionel Dahmer. Born on May 21, 1960 in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, Dahmer's early life seemed unremarkable. However, beneath the surface, dark tendencies were brewing. The name alone sends chills down the spines of those familiar with his heinous acts. His crimes were not just murders, they were acts of unimaginable horror that left an indelible mark on the psyche of America. He is known as the Milwaukee Cannibal and the Milwaukee Monster. These names are not mere hyperbole, they encapsulate the sheer terror and revulsion that his actions inspired. These monikers reflect the horrific nature of his crimes. Dahmer's apartment was a chamber of horrors, filled with gruesome evidence of his macabre activities. Dahmer was one of America's most notorious serial killers. His arrest in 1991 brought to light a series of crimes that shocked the nation and the world. He terrorized Milwaukee, Wisconsin throughout the 1980s. His reign of terror lasted over a decade, during which he lured unsuspecting victims to their doom. Dahmer preyed on young men and boys, subjecting them to unimaginable horrors. His victims, often marginalized and vulnerable, fell into his deadly trap, never to be seen again. This essay delves into the depths of Dahmer's crimes. It explores the meticulous planning and chilling execution of his murders, revealing a mind consumed by darkness. It examines his troubled life, his descent into madness, and the devastating impact he had on his victims and their families. The ripple effects of his actions are still felt today, as the families of his victims continue to grapple with their loss and the haunting memories of Dahmer's atrocities. Troubled beginnings, a tumultuous childhood. Jeffrey Dahmer was born on May 21, 1960, in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. Milwaukee, a city known for its brewing traditions and industrial roots, was where Dahmer's life began. His early years were spent in a seemingly typical Midwestern family, but beneath the surface there were already signs of trouble. His childhood was seemingly ordinary, but signs of trouble brewed beneath the surface. Family photos from the era show a young Jeffrey, often appearing distant and disconnected. While other children played and laughed, Jeffrey seemed to be lost in his own world, a world that would soon reveal its dark nature. Some experts speculate that Dahmer's fascination with death began at an early age. His intense interest in insects and small animals was not just a childhood curiosity, it was an early indication of his morbid fascination with the macabre. This interest would later evolve into something far more sinister. They point to his interest in animal bones and dissection. Jeffrey would spend hours examining and dissecting animal remains, a hobby that alarmed those who knew him. This behavior, while seemingly innocent to some, was a precursor to the horrific acts he would commit in his later years. His parents' tumultuous relationship and eventual divorce further aggravated his emotional instability. The constant fighting and eventual separation of his parents left a deep emotional scar on young Jeffrey. He often found himself caught in the middle of their disputes, feeling increasingly isolated and abandoned. Dahmer's teenage years were marked by social isolation and academic struggles. He found it difficult to connect with his peers and often felt like an outsider. His grades began to slip, and he withdrew further into himself, finding solace in his dark fantasies. He grappled with his sexuality and harbored dark fantasies. The confusion and shame he felt about his sexual orientation only added to his sense of isolation. He began to fantasize about control and domination, thoughts that would later manifest in his gruesome crimes. These early warning signs foreshadowed the monster he would become. The dark clouds of his childhood and teenage years were a harbinger of the storm that was to come. Jeffrey Dahmer's early life was a complex web of emotional turmoil, isolation, and dark obsessions, setting the stage for the horrors that would later unfold. The first victim, the gruesome fate of Stephen Hicks. In 1978, at the age of 18, Dahmer committed his first murder. His victim was Stephen Hicks, an 18-year-old hitchhiker. Dahmer lured Hicks to his home under false pretenses. He offered him beer and company. Once inside, Dahmer bludgeoned Hicks with a dumbbell. He strangled him to death. This first kill ignited a dark and twisted desire within him. It marked the beginning of his descent into utter depravity. A reign of terror, descent into depravity. Over the next 13 years, Dahmer's gruesome killing spree continued. His actions cast a long dark shadow over the city of Milwaukee, leaving a trail of fear and devastation in their wake. The community was gripped by a sense of dread as the true extent of his crimes began to unfold. He preyed on vulnerable young men, often from marginalized communities. These were individuals who were already struggling with societal neglect and discrimination, making them easy targets for Dahmer's sinister intentions. His victims were often lured with promises of friendship, money, or a place to stay, only to meet a tragic end. Dahmer would lure his victims to his apartment with promises of money, drugs, or sex. His charm and manipulative tactics made it easy for him to gain their trust. Once inside, the true horror would begin, as he would reveal his monstrous nature. Once there, he would drug them, torture them, and ultimately kill them. The apartment, which seemed like a safe haven, quickly turned into a chamber of horrors. The dim lighting and scattered prescription pills painted a grim picture of the terror that unfolded within those walls. Dahmer's methods were shockingly cruel. He used a variety of tools and chemicals to carry out his heinous acts. The cluttered room, filled with ominous instruments, was a testament to his twisted mind and the lengths he would go to satisfy his dark desires. He experimented with different ways to end his victims' lives. Each method was more horrifying than the last, as he sought to perfect his gruesome techniques. The crime scene photos and eerie lab setups provided a chilling glimpse into the macabre world he created. He engaged in necrophilia and cannibalism. These acts of depravity were beyond comprehension, revealing the depths of his disturbed psyche. The morbid imagery of bones and remains highlighted the extent of his perverse actions. Dahmer kept trophies from his victims. These macabre artifacts served as grim reminders of his horrific acts. The preserved specimens and jars were a haunting testament to the lives he had taken, and the twisted satisfaction he derived from his crimes. He preserved body parts as grim reminders of his horrific acts. The autopsy room and the dark room filled with preserved human remains were stark reminders of the brutality and inhumanity of his actions. Each preserved part was a chilling memento of the lives he had destroyed, leaving an indelible mark on the annals of criminal history. Section 5. A Narrow Escape, Tracy Edwards' Harrowing Tale. In July 1991, Dahmer's reign of terror came to an end thanks to the bravery of Tracy Edwards. Edwards, a 32-year-old man, managed to escape from Dahmer's apartment. He alerted the police. Edwards had been drugged and restrained by Dahmer. He managed to overpower Dahmer and escape while Dahmer was distracted. The police arrived at Dahmer's apartment. They discovered a scene of unimaginable horror. Section 6. Justice served, arrest, trial, and sentencing. The police found Polaroids of Dahmer's victims in various stages of dismemberment. They also discovered preserved body parts scattered throughout the apartment. The evidence against Dahmer was overwhelming. He confessed to his crimes in detail. Dahmer's trial was a media sensation. The world watched in horror as the full extent of his crimes was revealed. In 1992, Dahmer was found guilty of 15 counts of murder. He was sentenced to 15 consecutive life terms in prison. Section 7. Life Behind Bars and an Untimely End. Dahmer was incarcerated at the Columbia Correctional Institution in Portage, Wisconsin. He initially showed little remorse for his actions. However, in later years he began to express some regret for his crimes. He turned to religion. He sought redemption through Bible study. Dahmer's life in prison was short-lived. On November 28, 1994, he was beaten to death by a fellow inmate, Christopher Scarver. Section 8. The Aftermath. Dahmer's legacy and societal impact. Jeffrey Dahmer's crimes shocked the world. They left an indelible mark on society. His case raised awareness about the dangers of prejudice and discrimination. Many of Dahmer's victims were marginalized individuals. Their disappearances often went unnoticed or were not thoroughly investigated. Dahmer's crimes also highlighted the importance of mental health awareness and treatment. Section 9. Conclusion. A chilling reminder. Jeffrey Dahmer's story is a chilling reminder of the capacity for evil that exists within humanity. It is a story of a deeply disturbed individual who committed unspeakable acts. Dahmer's crimes continue to fascinate and horrify people to this day. His case serves as a reminder of the importance of vigilance, compassion, and a just society.